Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally deconstructing a myth. We're pulling back the curtain on a place that is universally revered, deeply feared, and, honestly, completely misunderstood. We're looking at the 1986 World Cup and the single most famous football match in history. But you see, to actually understand the magic of that moment, we have to look at the massive, concrete beast that made it possible in the first place. We are breaking down the legendary Estadio Azteca. Okay, let's dive into this, because stepping onto the pitch at the Azteca, it isn't just a sporting challenge. It is a visceral, biological shock to the system. You have to imagine stepping out of a tunnel into the blinding light and suddenly feeling like you literally can't breathe, all while over 100,000 people are screaming down at you. It's sensory overload, and it is entirely by design. The reality of this stadium is just brutal. The Azteca sits at an elevation of 2,240 meters. That's over 7,300 feet above sea level. To put that into perspective, that is higher than the Burj Khalifa and the Empire State Building stacked directly on top of each other. At this altitude, the air is so incredibly thin, so starved of oxygen, that visiting players have actually been documented hawking up black phlegm. Yeah. They've described the sheer physical terror of playing here as feeling like they'd been working down in a coal mine for 40 years. Your cardiovascular system has to work in absolute overdrive just to perform basic sprints. It's a biological trap.
But the altitude is really only half the equation here. Welcome to part 1, the concrete sombrero.
The Azteca, or as it's often nicknamed, the Colossus of St. Ursula, was literally carved into an ancient lava field back in the 1960s. The architects, led by Pedro Ramirez Vázquez, used this mix of Mexican modernism and heavy brutalist architecture to create what is essentially a giant concrete sombrero. And this massive, cantilevered roof doesn't just provide shade. No, it traps and amplifies sound. When 114,000 fans roar inside this bowl, the vibration and the noise levels are enough to make ordinary visitors physically dizzy. It's a weaponized sound chamber, meaning opponents fatigue faster here than almost anywhere else on the planet. So take that intense, exhausting physical environment and introduce part 2, a political powder keg. To really understand the tension of the 1986 quarterfinal between Argentina and England, you absolutely have to understand this devastating number right here, 904. That is the total number of military personnel dead from the 1982 Falklands War, which was fought just 4 short years prior between the United Kingdom and Argentina. The conflict resulted in the deaths of 649 Argentine and 255 British personnel. At the time, diplomatic relations were virtually non-existent, yet here these two teams were, set to meet on this very pitch. It elevated a simple game of football into a life-or-death proxy. Officially, the narrative was that football had absolutely nothing to do with the war, but the reality for the guys on the pitch was vastly different. As Argentine captain Diego Maradona later admitted, the team carried the heavy, traumatic memory of the conflict right onto the field with them. They viewed the match as a symbolic revenge. You have to remember, this was set against the backdrop of a massive 1985 earthquake that had just devastated Mexico City, plus the lingering trauma of the war back home. So this quarterfinal, it became a spiritual exorcism for a downtrodden nation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it leads us directly into part 3, the black market jersey. Listen to this, because the most iconic match in history almost didn't happen in the official uniforms. Just 72 hours before kickoff against England, Argentine coach Carlos Bilardo realized a fatal flaw. Their official blue cotton away jerseys were way too heavy for the searing heat and the punishing altitude of the Azteca. With the official manufacturers basically saying, "We can't help you," a staff member was sent deep into the heart of Mexico City. We're talking about the Tepito barrio, a neighborhood so notorious for illicit goods and gang activity that even the local police hesitated to go in there. But they went, and they found a lighter fabric, buying 20 counterfeit blue shirts off the street for just 50 pesos each. Tailors were frantically ironing on these silvery, American football-style numbers and stitching makeshift badges right up until kickoff. And the stunning punchline to that desperate high-stakes dash into a slum, one of those makeshift black market shirts, the exact one worn by Maradona during this match, went up for auction in 2022. It sold for a staggering $9.28 million. I mean, wow. A cheap street shirt literally became the most expensive piece of sports memorabilia in the entire world at the time. Let's move to and see how this builds into part 4, 4 minutes of madness. This is the sequence that completely rewrote football history. The first half,
It was a tense, cautious, deeply tactical 0-0 gridlock. Neither side was giving an inch. But then, absolute chaos erupted. In the 51st minute, we get the infamous Hand of God goal. And then, exactly 4 minutes later, in the 55th minute, the goal of the century. Two deeply, profoundly contrasting moments performed by the exact same player perfectly back-to-back.
The juxtaposition here is just staggering. First, an England clearance loops up into the penalty area. The 5'5" Maradona jumps up against the 6'1" English goalkeeper Peter Shilton. In a fraction of a second, Maradona raises his left fist and just illegally punches the ball into the net. The referee completely misses it. The goal stands. It's a profane, rule-breaking act. But then, just 4 minutes later, Maradona takes the ball deep in his own half and executes this flawless 60-meter dribble. He leaves 5 elite English defenders totally in his wake before scoring. It is a moment of divine, pure athletic genius. Half devil, half angel, all in the span of 240 seconds.
So the crucial point is that the hand of God wasn't just a foul. It was a cultural embodiment of survival and deception. For Maradona, who was raised in a Buenos Aires shantytown, it was the ultimate expression of viveza criolla. This translates to the cunning of the criollos, a cultural concept of street-smart trickery and a rule-bending survival tactic. Disguising the punch by flicking his head at the exact same moment, to his supporters, that wasn't just cheating. It was a brilliant deception born entirely out of survival. Maradona went on to lift the World Cup trophy in that very stadium, cementing his mythos forever. But stepping back from the man to look at the building itself, we reached part 5, the cathedral's legacy. And this brilliantly illustrates why the Azteca is fundamentally different from any other stadium on Earth. It is a continuous physical record of the sport. In 1970, it hosted Pelé's massive triumph with what many consider the greatest team ever assembled. In 1986, it hosted Maradona's mythos. And looking ahead to 2026, it will become the first and only stadium in human history to host a third Men's World Cup, acting as the massive global anchor for a 48-team tournament.
But let's deconstruct one final myth here. FIFA's return to the Azteca in 2026 isn't just about some romantic nostalgia. No, it's about raw, brutalist capability. A lot of people don't realize that the 1986 World Cup was originally supposed to be held in Colombia. But when Colombia had to withdraw due to financial issues, the Azteca was essentially the only stadium in the entire Western Hemisphere with the operational maturity and the sheer capacity to step in and save the tournament on short notice. This is a venue that once evacuated 105,000 people in just 10 minutes during a religious assembly. It is the ultimate high-stakes logistical survivor.
Which really brings us to the ultimate question as we look forward to the opening of the 2026 Games. When a building absorbs the collective anxiety of a massive earthquake, the profound grief of a war, the breathless, suffocating heat of a 2,200-meter altitude, the cunning of a desperate street heist jersey, and the pure brilliance of the greatest goals ever scored. Is the Aztec merely a structure of concrete and steel? Or is it truly a living, breathing confession booth for football's greatest ghosts? I hope this explainer has given you a whole new lens through which to view the beautiful game. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.